The government panel on net neutrality backs for internet freedom, but with a few exceptions, wants online messaging and international calls to be untouched, but suggests regulating domestic internet calls. Also wants zero rating services to be allowed on a case-by-case basis.
ये जो FDI, FPI, NRI इन्वेस्टमेंट, ये अलग-अलग क्लासिफिकेशंस हैं, ये अब क्लब हो जाएंगे.
Government approves a composite foreign investment cap. Foreign direct investment, portfolio investment and NRI investments will be treated as the same, but sectoral caps are here to stay.
Is this the end of the road for India's biggest foreign investment? POSCO vacates offices in Odisha. Sources say it could pull the plug on the $12 billion steel plant. The company says it's cutting down expenditure as part of a global exercise and it's not leaving India just yet.
The competition watchdog cracks the whip on 4 state-run insurance companies for rigging bids on a tender from the Kerala government, imposes a whopping 670 crore rupee penalty.
Bulls power ahead on the Lal Street. The Nifty regains 8,600 as banks lead the rally. The Sensex gains nearly 250 points. Mid-caps outperform.
The government is not giving up on the land bill just yet. Sources say the centre could empower states to legislate their own laws and ratify them. Hopes at least 14 states could back that move. That's CNBC TV 18 exclusive.
The INDO-MAURITIUS tax treaty is not yet final, says the counsel to the Mauritius government. This after online reports hinted at big changes to the treaty. That's a CNBC TV 18 exclusive.
Banking Secretary sends an SOS to the Steel Secretary. Seeks intervention in top 8 projects where banks have an exposure of over 1 lakh crore rupees. That's a CNBC TV 18 exclusive.
A day after winning a $3 billion contract, Anil Ambani promises to invest 5,000 crore rupees into Pipavav shipyard. The stock surges as Ambani vows to make it a global center of excellence in shipbuilding.
हर एक युवा को नेट का अधिकार होना चाहिए.
This government is committed to the fundamental principles and concept of net neutrality.
Is blatantly in favor not of the consumer, it's in favor of telecom.
For international companies, it makes it difficult to enter India because every time they will have to go and negotiate with the telecom operator.
This is for the telecom, by the telecom, of the telecom, and this fight against net neutrality. See, we don't have a problem with telecom companies. May their tribe increase.
International calls are going to remain open and free without license, but it's the domestic VoIP calling which they are bringing, which they want to bring under a kind of a regulatory framework.
It's a balancing act by the telecom department. It has upheld net neutrality in principle, but with a few riders. Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on India Business Hour. Hi, Nentara.
Good evening, Shri. An action-packed show for our viewers today.
Oh, there is a lot happening this Thursday evening. Let's get straight to the day's market action. The bulls are on the charge. The market's rallying once again thanks to the Greek Parliament voting yes for the bailout and the government back home simplifying the foreign investment norms. The Nifty has reconquered 8,600, gaining close to 1%. Bank stocks leading from the front today. The Sensex also gaining nearly 250 points as it continues to march towards 29,000. Mid-caps outrun the blue chips once again today, gaining by over 1%. So the market's looking good on the back of global cues and, of course, what's happening back home as well. The cabinet today cleared the DIPP's proposal for a composite cap on foreign investment. This policy will club together foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment and investments by non-resident Indians. Here's the finance minister announcing that cabinet decision.
One of the most important decisions in relation to the investment is the introduction of composite caps for simplification of foreign direct investments. ये जो FDI, FPI, NRI इन्वेस्टमेंट, ये अलग-अलग क्लासिफिकेशंस हैं, ये अब क्लब हो जाएंगे और इनको अब कंपोजिट कैप के रूप में माना जाएगा.
As the Finance Minister explaining the new cap that is going to be in place. However, Finance Ministry sources say the composite FDI cap will be subject to sectoral conditionality. Sapna Das now joining us with that exclusive story. Sapna, what exactly are you picking up?
Well, even in the composite FDI cap, the sectoral conditionalities are not going to be relaxed because they have not been changed. What has changed is simply the fact that more instruments will be allowed. It won't only be FDI, but it will also be FI, FPI and QFI. Having said that, the two main sectors which will get affected, or rather which will not get affected by this probably at this stage in time, are defense. The FI cap 24%, that will remain. For banking, anything beyond 49% in terms of portfolio investments, you need government approval. It's on the FIBB route and that will still continue. So whatever the extent policy is, that doesn't change. Similarly for the insurance sector, though the 49% cap is already a composite cap. Here again, whenever you step up your investment from 26% to 49%, the foreign investment, you do need the government approval and that will still continue. So all in all, whatever are the extent rules and regulations, they will override wherever required, or if there's a separate carve-out that has been made, for example, the defense sector. What the government basically has done has brought in fungibility. You have more instruments within that composite cap, but the sectoral conditions have not yet been relaxed, and very soon the DIPP will be coming out with a fresh press note release which will clarify the details.
All right, Sapna, so the markets perhaps getting ahead of themselves, but as Sapna is pointing out, the sectoral caps continue to remain. The subsectoral caps, as Sapna was pointing out, for instance, 24% is the subsectoral cap for FII investment in the defense sector. Those subsectoral caps also stay. Of course, we haven't heard the final word yet from the DIPP. This is source-based information. Now, speaking of foreign investment, it could be the end of the road for the $12 billion POSCO steel plant in Odisha. This has been a project that's been mired by uncertainty and delays. The company's office in Odisha has been vacated, hinting towards a pullout by the South Korean steel major from what is potentially the largest foreign direct investment in India. Biju Janata Dal MP Jay Panda, speaking to CNBC TV 18, confirmed that POSCO has in fact vacated certain office spaces in the state. However, he also added that it's unclear if the move is temporary or the withdrawal is permanent. He said that the company is citing lower demand along with delays and mining bottlenecks, but really lower demand on account of the slowdown in global growth, the slowdown in China, and that is part of POSCO's global strategy to try and cut down on its expenditure. The South Korean major still maintains that it has no plans of boycotting its India project, saying that the company is merely looking to renovate its office in Odisha and eventually occupy a smaller space. The plant was first proposed in 2005, but the environmental clearance came only last year during the end of the UPA rule. So POSCO clarifying, saying that it is still sticking with its India project, but yes, it is cutting down on expenditure as part of its global growth strategy. Will this withdrawal be temporary or not? Will this project stay or not? Continues to be a question, but POSCO at this time saying it will stay on in India. Nandara.
There's another big decision that was taken today, Shireen, by the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. It's also cleared a proposal to redevelop 400 railway stations across the country, and the government has decided for the first time to introduce the Swiss challenge method of bidding in the country. This is how the Swiss challenge method works. A company from the private sector can submit an unsolicited bid to a government agency, and then others interested can try to defeat that bid. There will be a time limit that will be set by the government by which the private sector can fight within each other to try and outdo each other to get to redevelop a railway station. We also understand the government has already shortlisted 400 cities, and they're mainly tier 2, tier 3 cities.
Absolutely, and Suresh Prabhu saying that there is going to be no sale of land, but air and land rights will of course be given as far as those stations that are going to be redeveloped. Now, the Competition Commission has cracked down hard on 4 state-run insurance companies. They've been found guilty of flouting rules in order to bag a tender that had been floated by the Kerala government. Malvika Jain joins us now with the details. Malvika, which are these insurance companies? And it's a hefty penalty of over 600 crore rupees.
Well, that's right. Four state-owned insurance companies have been slapped with a penalty of around 671 crore rupees by the Competition Commission of India. These companies include National Insurance Company, New India Assurance, Oriental Insurance and United India Insurance Company. Now, basically, the Competition Commission of India has found these four companies guilty of violating Section 27 of the Competition Act, having formed a cartel and rigged the bidding process for a tender that was floated by the Kerala government under the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana back in November 2009. In their defense, the four insurance companies have said that the fact that their bids were the same is because of the reason that they are the same economic entity, given that all four of them are 100% owned by the government. But the Competition Commission of India has concluded that since these four companies are separate legal entities, that the decision to bid and the amount that they should bid for was not approved or endorsed by the Finance Ministry in any manner. It cannot be said that these four companies are the same economic entity for the purpose of bidding in the tender floated by the Kerala government. Now, since these companies have been found guilty of violating the Competition Act, they will have to deposit this penalty amount within a period of 60 days. But like it happens in most cases, the sense that we are getting from legal sources is that these companies may approach the Competition Appellate Tribunal.
Well, of course, we expect them to approach legal counsel and legal recourse as far as this matter is concerned. Malvika, appreciate you joining us there, but an over 600 crore rupee penalty, that's pretty massive. Now, regulate domestic calls offered by apps like WhatsApp, Viber and others, but adopt a liberal approach towards international calls and messages. That's the biggest takeaway from a report by a telecom department panel on net neutrality. While the panel backs for internet freedom, it's also made a few exceptions. Malvika dials in with the details.
A telecom ministry panel has recommended that voice services offered by over-the-top players like WhatsApp and Viber be regulated. In the 111-page-long report, the DoT committee explains that VoIP offered by OTTs has the potential of disrupting domestic telecom markets and may have an undesirable effect on telecom infrastructure growth. But in what could be a dampener for telcos, DoT's internal committee wants all tariff plans to be cleared by the telecom watchdog. The committee believes it is impossible to pre-think all tariff plan possibilities and their validity under net neutrality principles and has thus recommended a two-pronged approach. The first aspect being that tariff plans, including zero-rating plans, will need to be filed with the TRAI for its approval. Besides that, any complaints on tariff plans should be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. Presently, companies are free to design their tariff plans so long as they fall within the ceiling rate prescribed by the telecom regulator. The panel has also recommended that collaborations between telcos and content providers that enable gatekeeping role to be played by any entity should be actively discouraged. Making a special mention of the Facebook's www.internet.org initiative, the report goes on to say, and I quote, "Until April 2015, Internet.org users could have free access to only a few websites, and Facebook's role as a gatekeeper in determining what websites were in that list was seen as violating net neutrality." Unquote. The force behind the Save the Internet movement in India, Nikhil Pava, says that DoT panel's report is an improvement over the TRAI consultation paper, but still falls short of protecting net neutrality.
An improvement, but disappointing because they still are allowing zero rating in particular, and they're looking to regulate domestic VoIP calls.
Telecom Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad says the government will finalize its policy on net neutrality after it hears from the telecom regulator, the TRAI, which is currently headless. In New Delhi, Malvika Jain.
Let's get you more from this story. The Telecom Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad has now clarified the report is not his ministry's final view on the issue, and his government remains committed to its promise of ensuring a level playing field for all internet facilities. Remember, Ravi Shankar Prasad in the floor of the parliament had said he favours net neutrality.
The present report is not the report of the Department of Telecommunication. It is the report of the committee of officials which are constituted to give me an overview of what is the whole scenario of net neutrality and what is the way forward. This report has come in public domain. A copy of this report has also been sent to TRAI. As I had told the Parliament, I will await the TRAI's report, and thereafter the government will take a very considered view in the Ministry of Telecommunication and also the Cabinet. But having said that, let me clarify, the government of Shri Narendra Modi is deeply committed to the larger goal of availability of internet without any discrimination to the people of India.
Well, it sounds like the government is already disowning the DOT panel report. Joining us now, Milind Deora, Congress leader and former MP who's been very active on social media, also the former Minister of Telecom in the UPA. Milind, thanks very much for joining us on CNBC TV 18. Let me start by asking you for your specific reaction to the DOT panel's recommendations that domestic voice calls offered by over-the-top service providers should be regulated and should be treated similar to telecom companies' voice services.
Well, I think it's hard to implement that. I'm not sure how DOT or the regulator TRAI will go about bringing only the local voice calls of OTT service providers under the same licensing regime that's applicable for telcos. And frankly, I'm a little disappointed with not just this report, but the fact that TRAI's report on net neutrality still hasn't been presented before this government. And more importantly, the fact that the Minister and the Prime Minister have been completely silent on a very important issue of net neutrality. I think if they followed what President Obama had done in the United States, wherein he made an unambiguous statement in favor of net neutrality, that in turn would have set the ball rolling in terms of giving a direction to the regulator, to the DOT, with regards to where India wants to go on net neutrality. As a result of not doing that, you have an ambiguous set of guidelines which could only lead to misuse, fines, harassment, and litigation. And that's ultimately not just bad for the customer and for the innovation ecosystem, but it's equally bad for the telcos.
Milind, the telecom minister has very categorically stated that the government favors net neutrality. But in principle, forget the execution part. In principle, are you in agreement with what the DOT panel is saying? Are you saying that there should be a level playing field between voice services offered by OTT players as well as telecom companies? Forget the implementation part. But in principle, do you agree with what the DOT panel is recommending?
No. The level playing field, Shireen, can be done in many ways. The level playing field could, think out of the box and provide an incentive perhaps to telcos who could stand to lose money. Firstly, I don't believe in the long run telcos will lose money. I think in the long run net neutrality is good for telcos as well. And it's unfortunate that telcos all over the world don't understand that. So I'm not saying it's one or the other. They can find a way to incentivize them to offset their losses. But net neutrality is a non-negotiable philosophy and a principle on which India's internet growth should stand on. And that's something where the government has been very ambiguous. The government hasn't come out clean in saying that they believe in the underlying principles of net neutrality. They've said, yes, we want the internet to be accessible, free, we want consumers to have a choice, but then at the same time we're going to regulate local calls from OTT service providers. So that to me is not making sense.
Okay, Milind, hang on. I also reached out to Trinamool MP Derek O'Brien, who is member of the standing committee that's looking into the issue of net neutrality earlier today. He is, of course, a member of that parliamentary panel. I started by asking him how he felt about this report, whether he thinks it's an improvement over the TRAI consultation paper, which he saw as being draconian. Let's listen in.
This is for the telecom, by the telecom, of the telecom, and this fight against net neutrality. See, we don't have a problem with telecom companies. May their tribe increase.
Okay.
But the freedom which millions of netizens have of the right to choose, please, Shireen, don't restrict your debate only to the telephone, only to the calls, because there are other issues also mentioned in this report. But the television channel is a nice place for us to go and make a few opening comments, and thank you for having me on your show. But this debate has to go to the ultimate platform in this nation, and that is Parliament.
No, but let's talk about specifics, Derek. Let's talk about specifics, because as you point out, voice calls is only one aspect of this report. But let's talk about rating platforms, for instance, because once again the DOT panel says that it has to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. And the DOT panel also goes on to say, which is a disadvantage to telecom companies, that telecom companies will have to submit their tariff plans to the regulator before they can go ahead with their new tariff plans, which is not the case today. So I'm asking you to point out in what areas you believe that the DOT panel has favored telecom companies.
I am not going to deal all my cards out on CNBC evening television program. I will give you my broad views now. Firstly, the first question you raised. The first question you raised was on case-to-case basis on the zero rating. What case-to-case basis on zero rating? What does case-to-case basis mean? Case-to-case basis, if you paraphrase case-to-case basis, it means how to fix the system better. So this is totally bakwas. Why should discretion be allowed here in the first place? Why should it be allowed here? You please tell me. And please understand, it is not the business of Parliament or any member of Parliament to ensure that the telecom companies have a good year at the end of 1 year or 2 years. They are responsible to the shareholders of those companies. Good luck to them. But I would also like to tell you that all these telecom companies, whether it be Bharti, whether it be Vodafone, whether it be Reliance, whether it be this Idea, if you look at some of those speeches all these people have made, and I've got here because I can't remember all of what they said, they're all talking about a twofold jump in, and this is not Derek O'Brien and Trinamool Congress making it up. You please look at all those earnings and review statements which have been issued by their managing directors or their joint managing directors. Shireen, you please look at those statements. I've got those statements in the public domain. They're from the AGMs. Airtel talks about a twofold jump in consolidated profit. They talk about no evidence that suggests there is cannibalization. So these companies are all doing very well. These companies are all doing very well and good. But if they cannot compete with technology, you're killing the technology. If you want WhatsApp to do something, no. So this is not going to work. I can tell you, this is not the end of the battle.
I agree with you.
This is not the end of the battle. There are many points here, case to case, point by point. It will also not be correct on my part to talk too much on television because there are two other forums which I have an opportunity to speak. One is Parliament and two is this is also being discussed in the Parliamentary Standing Committee, and I cannot discuss anything which happens in the Parliamentary Standing Committee here on your channel, except for one thing. There again, this net... Yeah, please go ahead, sorry.
Fair enough.
No, go ahead.
Yes.
You want to say... Yeah, go ahead.
No. I understand that you cannot discuss what is going to be discussed in the parliamentary panel, Derek. But very quickly, the government has now said, and Ravi Shankar Prasad, the telecom minister, has said that the matter will be decided post the TRAI's recommendations. The TRAI is headless at this point in time. Given the sensitive nature of this issue, do you really believe that perhaps the government is not going to want to bite this bullet and let this lie low for now?
Shireen, I'm not the spokesperson of the government. Nor do I want to be, nor am I the minister. All I can tell you is that I am also let me tell you something.
What's your sense, Derek?
We have the Trinamool Congress, we do not want to take the brownie points on this. We have discussed this with other parties. My people in the Congress who I've discussed this with, they are very serious about this. They want to take this forward. There are one or two other parties also who want to take this forward. So I don't want to make this an issue which is Trinamool Congress versus the rest. No, I believe that in the larger interest of 20 million people who use the internet in India, or whatever that number is, those young people, that freedom should be maintained.
Well, that was Derek O'Brien in conversation with me. But Milind, my final question to you, let me ask you this. What would you have done if you government's position today? As a former minister, you were looking out for some of these issues in your previous portfolio. Without getting political about this debate, what would you do if you were in office today?
I think it's a very good question, and politics aside, if I was still sitting in the same chair that I was a little over a year ago, the first thing I would have done is met the Prime Minister of India, explained my position to him, had a discussion and a debate with him on net neutrality. And if the Prime Minister and I and maybe the other ministers agreed that net neutrality is non-negotiable and it's extremely important for consumer choice and for innovation, we would have come out and made a very clear, unambiguous statement in favor of net neutrality. That then would have sent a message down the line to regulators, to DOT, to other officers who are looking at this and preparing reports in terms of establishing what is the government's intent. And I'm sure that would have led to a free and fair internet, which would have led to laws and rules that would have been announced which are completely unambiguous. And if that meant that there's a strong case that telcos are losing a lot of revenue, we would have found a way to perhaps incentivize them or help them offset that revenue. But that doesn't mean I would have taken away from the fact that the government is committed to net neutrality. The biggest thing that's missing from the way we would have done it or the way that President Obama did it in the United States is this government and ministers and the Prime Minister have been completely silent on that issue. And that just creates speculation, and that leads to confusion like we're seeing today.
Well, the government says it is in favor of net neutrality, and it almost looks like they are disowning this report. Milind, I appreciate you joining us. Moving on, the comments of the former Finance Minister of Mauritius have sparked alarm regarding the tax treaty negotiations between India and Mauritius. Ramasithanenan says he's seen the new protocol, and in it, Mauritius has given up the right to tax capital gains. If this is indeed true, it would have a significant impact on foreign investors investing in India via Mauritius. But Menka reports that the protocol may not yet be finalized. Menka, you've been tracking this story. Take us through this.
Well, there has been significant interest in the India-Mauritius tax treaty renegotiations and whether the amendments include a limitation of benefits clause as well as a change in Article 13 that takes away Mauritius's right to tax capital gains. Now, to clarify this, I am joined by senior tax lawyer Nishit Desai. Mr. Desai is counsel to the Mauritius government. Mr. Desai, thank you very much for speaking with us. Let me start by asking you whether the negotiations between the two countries are complete or not, because we have heard from different Mauritius ministers, and they seem to be indicating that the protocol is final and now just needs to be ratified by the cabinets of both governments.
Yeah, my understanding is that they are not fully complete at this point in time. I think still discussions are underway, and that's what is my understanding. I'm right now in Denver, Colorado, and so please pardon me because I'm not completely updated, but that's what is my understanding.
But since you've been a counsel to the Mauritius government on these renegotiations, sir, I'm sure you can tell me whether the amendments to the treaty are limited to the inclusion of a limitation of benefits clause. Is that the only change that's going to occur? Or are there changes to Article 13 as well, in which Mauritius gives up its right to tax capital gains?
You'll appreciate that I cannot comment, Menka. As a lawyer, I'm bound by confidentiality, and as you may know, the protocol needs to be ratified by the cabinet. Once it's finalized, only then it's made public by the government, and then I can make any comment.
Mr. Desai, you understand the anxiety in India with regards to these potential changes, especially since the former finance minister of Mauritius seems to have indicated that he has seen the protocol and in fact there is a change in Article 13 and that Mauritius has given up its right to tax capital gains.
And then, once again, I cannot breach my oath of confidentiality, and you'll pardon me for not being able to answer the question on that particular point. I cannot talk about content at this point in time.
Could you give us an indication, Mr. Desai, as to how foreign investors investing into India via the Mauritius route, whether they're likely to be impacted in any big way or not?
Again, at this point in time, it would be premature to say because the discussions are still not 100% complete, and therefore I would like to be excused on that point, Menka.
Do they have any reason to be worried, sir, foreign investors coming to India via the Mauritius route?
Well, my understanding is that Mauritius government or some communique would be coming from Mauritius very soon, and then we'll be in a better position to speak about it.
But given the fact that you are a veteran expert in this country on taxation and that you have many foreign investors as clients, would you say that foreign investors ought to be concerned or worried about the potential changes to the treaty without giving away what those changes are?
Well, I would say that, any time that treaty conversation happens, people get a little anxious. It's very natural. And, But I think at this point in time, it would not be proper for me to comment. And I hope you understand my position.
I understand your position, sir. It's a professional commitment. My final question then to you is this. When do you expect the changes to the treaty being finalized? Because I was under the impression the protocol's been finalized. You've just told me that it will take a few more days to be finalized and there could be a Mauritius communique out. Do you have any sense of what the timeline could be, sir?
It all depends. It all depends. I cannot say exactly because when discussions are there, there may be points that need to be, discussed. It may take 1 day, it may take 10 days, it may take 1 month. It's very, very, once again, to give that kind of predictability at this point in time, for me, is a little difficult.
Okay. I understand your professional commitment and therefore your inability to say anything. But on behalf of my viewers, I'm going to make one last-ditch effort, Mr. Desai, and that is to ask you whether we should expect big changes in the renegotiation.
You are very clever, Menka. All that I can say in asking good questions. But I have to be slightly understated and I, would not be able to say.
But big changes or not? So don't tell me what the changes are. Can you tell me whether they're big changes or not?
That can reflect on my comments on the content, and that is why it would be a little inappropriate on my part.
Okay, well, I'm sure you don't blame me for trying.
I'm sure, I think government of Mauritius or some authority from that side should be coming out with some communique very, very soon, and that will also give some indication to the investors and also to you about what's happening. So, then it will be more official. I hope you once again understand my concern.
I do. I understand that, and I hope you excuse me for putting the same question to you several times, but I did have to ask. Thank you, sir. We'll let you get on with the rest of your day. Thank you very much for joining us here on CNBC.
I'm used to your questions, Menka. No problem. Thank you.
Thanks very much, sir.
Bye-bye.
All right, with that, it's back to you guys. As you just heard it, the counsel to the Mauritius government not giving away much because of his inability to say anything at this point in time, given that it's confidential, but also saying that the protocol is not yet finalized. So there you have it. One more twist in the India-Mauritius tax treaty story.
Well, we can't be accused of not trying. Menka, appreciate you joining us here. Well, with that, it's time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. As you can see, there's plenty more to talk about. We'll, of course, return with all the market action tomorrow morning, bright and early. See you then.